This port just opened, and it's already sending shockwaves through Washington. In November 2024, China unveiled the $3.5 billion Chancay Port in Peru. Chinese COSCO now holds exclusive control over the most advanced, most strategic port on South America's Pacific coast. No shots fired, no public vote, just total dominance in America's backyard. And Peru didn't realize what they'd done until it was too late. Now, the US is scrambling to contain a move that could reshape global power. The story of the Chancay Port didn't begin with cranes rising over the Peruvian coast or containers stacked sky-high. It began quietly, behind closed doors in 2019, when one of the world's largest shipping giants, China's state-owned COSCO Shipping, made a move that barely registered in the Western media. COSCO quietly struck a deal with Peru's Vulcan Mining Company. COSCO would take a 60% stake in a brand new deepwater port just north of Lima, with Vulcan holding 40%. On the surface, it looked like a standard trade infrastructure project. But in reality, it was the opening move in something much bigger. The plan was simple: build a direct gateway between South America and China, bypassing the Panama Canal and eliminating reliance on US-aligned ports in Mexico or California. For Peru, it was a win, an opportunity to attract foreign investment, unlock jobs, and boost exports of copper, avocados, and fish meal. But for China, it was about control. Chancay wasn't just another stop on a shipping route. It was strategically positioned to become the first Chinese-controlled logistics hub on the Pacific coast of South America, a location that would allow Beijing to consolidate shipments from across the continent and send them straight to Asia aboard ultra-large container ships. And this wasn't a half measure. China committed over $3.5 billion to the project, making it one of the largest foreign infrastructure investments in Peruvian history. Unlike ports that evolve over decades, Chancay was built from scratch, designed to accommodate 24,000 container vessels and operate with the same speed and precision seen in Shanghai or Singapore. At the time, most of the world wasn't watching. US policymakers were focused on trade wars, supply chain shocks, and military tensions elsewhere. But while the headlines focused on tech sanctions and spy balloons, China was building something quieter and far more durable. In November 2024, Chancay officially opened, and with it, China secured more than just a trade route. It gained a physical, operational, and strategic foothold in Latin America, in a place where Washington once assumed it held all the cards. By the time construction began in full swing, COSCO was already planning beyond Peru. Chinese firms were expanding their reach across the region, buying stakes in ports in Brazil, Argentina, and Panama. But Chancay remained the crown jewel, the deepest, most advanced, and most strategically located port China would control in the Americas. And that control wasn't theoretical. It was real, and it was locked into the contract. So while cranes and dredgers transformed the coastline into a sprawling port complex, a quieter transformation was underway, a shift in who controlled South America's future. And almost no one in the West seemed to notice. Until now. What makes the Chancay Port so significant isn't just who controls it, it's what it can do. Located just north of Lima, Chancay was built from the ground up to dominate maritime logistics on South America's Pacific coast. Most regional ports struggle with shallow waters, outdated infrastructure, and limited scale. But Chancay is different. It reaches depths of nearly 60 feet, making it the first port in the region capable of hosting ultra-large container ships that carry up to 24,000 containers. The same size vessels used in Shanghai, Rotterdam, and Singapore. The terminal includes 11 berths for container ships and 4 additional berths for bulk, general, and roll-on/roll-off cargo. But perhaps its most striking feature is a 1.8-kilometer tunnel dug beneath the Pan American Highway, connecting the port directly to inland logistics centers. This bypasses traffic and speeds up cargo movement, a detail that highlights how the port was engineered for high-volume, high-efficiency throughput. In short, Chancay isn't a port that evolved. It's one that was designed for dominance. And it's not just Peru that benefits. Countries like Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Chile are already eyeing Chancay as a consolidation hub. Instead of shipping separately, they can send cargo overland to Peru, load it onto megavessels, and export directly to Asia. That changes everything, from trade timelines to regional partnerships. For exporters, the port means faster delivery, cheaper freight, and access to a growing network of Chinese maritime logistics. But for Beijing, the stakes are bigger. Chancay isn't just efficient, it's also controllable. COSCO operates every inch of the infrastructure, from berths to back offices. There's no competition, no oversight, and no local interference. That kind of centralized control is rare in global ports. And it's what allows China to replicate its model across continents. Every container that flows through Chancay strengthens China's hold on Latin American trade. And every country that plugs into it moves one step closer to a supply chain anchored in Beijing. With its depth, design, and geographic reach, Chancay has become more than a port. It's a blueprint for how China builds influence, with concrete, not conflict. For years, Washington largely ignored China's growing presence in Latin America. But Chancay changed that. By late 2023, U.S. defense and intelligence officials began raising red flags. This wasn't just a port. It was a strategic outpost. That alarm turned public when General Laura Richardson, head of U.S. Southern Command, issued a rare and direct warning. She pointed to Chancay as part of a larger pattern. China gaining control over critical infrastructure to expand its influence without military confrontation. Her greatest concern? Dual-use potential. Chancay may be civilian on paper, but ports like these can be quickly adapted for military logistics, surveillance, or cyber operations. In the wrong hands, a shipping terminal becomes a launch pad for power projection. No warships needed. With full control of the port, COSCO could reshape regional trade flows while laying the groundwork for future security risks. The U.S. response was urgent, but reactive. Diplomats approached Peru with offers of investment and partnerships. Quiet pressure was applied to reconsider COSCO's exclusivity. But it was too late. The contract was signed, the law had changed, and COSCO's grip was already locked in. So the U.S. pivoted. It began reinforcing relationships with nearby countries, upgrading naval partnerships, and exploring counterweights in Colombia, Chile, and Ecuador. But even these measures felt like catch-up. Chancay was already operational, and its success sent a message to every capital in the region. Why wait for Western funding when Chinese capital is faster, simpler, and arrives with cranes? In closed-door briefings, American officials began calling Chancay a logistics beachhead, a peaceful occupation through investment. Some even described it as a Trojan horse, hiding influence in shipping containers. Because the real threat isn't just what Chancay is today, it's what it signals tomorrow. If China can secure one of South America's most strategic ports with a quiet deal and a buried clause, and turn it into a launch pad for influence, what's to stop it from doing the same elsewhere? If this model spreads, Washington's grip on Latin American trade and security could begin to slip. And in the quiet tug-of-war between concrete and diplomacy, the side that moves faster often wins. On the surface, Peru is winning. The Chancay port opened in November 2024 with fanfare. Billions in foreign investment poured in. Jobs were created. Exporters now have faster, cheaper access to booming markets in Asia. Products like blueberries, avocados, copper, and fish meal are reaching China in record time. But beneath the surface, a storm is brewing. While local businesses benefit from the new logistics hub, many are starting to ask what exactly Peru gave up in return. COSCO doesn't just operate the port, it controls it entirely. That means Peruvian companies can't compete inside the system. Every shipment, every transaction, every fee flows through a Chinese state-owned filter. Over time, critics warn, domestic firms could be priced out of their own market. Legal experts have raised deeper questions. How did such broad authority get signed away? Was the exclusivity clause simply overlooked, or was it deliberately buried? A calculated move in a high-stakes negotiation that Peru was never prepared to win? Government officials defend the deal, pointing to economic growth and long-term infrastructure gains. They argue that without Chinese capital, the port would never have been built. And with growing global demand for raw materials, Peru needed a logistics platform that could scale fast. But the trade-off is clear. Economic progress at the cost of leverage. And the timing couldn't be more uncomfortable. Peru now finds itself caught between two global powers. The United States is pressuring Lima to reassert sovereignty. China is signaling that any attempt to revise COSCO's role could result in economic retaliation or withdrawn investment. There's no safe option, only consequences. In the public sphere, the debate is intensifying. Protesters have demanded greater transparency. Opposition leaders have called for an investigation. Yet few believe the government will take action. The port is already complete. The contracts are law. And any disruption would damage Peru's fragile economy and global reputation. So for now, Peru watches, and waits. Locked into a 30-year agreement, the country stands to gain much, but risks losing something far harder to recover: independence over its own trade future. The Chancay Port was never just about Peru. From the moment COSCO took control, it became a symbol of something much larger: a shift in the balance of influence between two superpowers. China didn't build a port just to move cargo. It built leverage, and in doing so, it triggered the emergence of a new geopolitical front, one that's unfolding not in the South China Sea or cyberspace, but along the shores of Latin America. To the United States, Chancay is a strategic wake-up call. The U.S. is no longer the default partner for Latin American development. For decades, it assumed that geographic proximity and historical ties were enough to guarantee dominance in the region. But China has rewritten that playbook, offering faster financing, fewer conditions, and long-term infrastructure projects that deliver results. And Chancay proves the model works. It shows Latin American nations that they don't have to wait for Western lenders or endure endless red tape. They can turn to Beijing and get a port, a railway, a power plant in a fraction of the time. But with that speed comes strings. What happens when a Chinese company not only builds a port, but runs it, controls it, and locks in legal exclusivity for decades? What happens when the software, surveillance, and operational systems are all designed to serve Beijing's interests, not the host nations? That's what Washington fears. And it's not just Chancay. In Argentina, Chinese firms have signed agreements to operate lithium mines. In Brazil, telecom giants like Huawei are wiring up critical infrastructure. In Panama, Chinese companies are bidding for canal-adjacent projects. Piece by piece, the influence grows. Not through threats or force, but through contracts, capital, and construction. The U.S. can't afford to ignore these moves anymore. With every new port China controls, the rules of global trade bend a little further east. For Peru, the next steps are limited. COSCO is firmly entrenched. The infrastructure is complete. The exclusivity clause is law. Any attempt to reclaim control risks economic retaliation and diplomatic fallout. Not just from China, but from investors worldwide who now see Peru as a test case for foreign capital reliability. For the U.S., the playbook is being rewritten in real time. Counter-investments, infrastructure diplomacy, military cooperation cloaked in economic terms. Washington is starting to fight back, but it's doing so in a world where speed, not tradition, wins. For China, Chancay is already a success. The port is operational. The contracts are locked. And perhaps most importantly, the message is sent. That message? The Pacific isn't an American lake anymore. It's now contested. China now has a working blueprint for influence without occupation, expansion without invasion. And if it can secure a continent's resources through ports, pipelines, and power grids, what need is there for war? Yet for the U.S., the threat is clear. What begins with trade routes may eventually shape voting blocs, military alignments, even political regimes.